Trump recognizes Jerusalem. Why haven't we always? Whiny Hollywood actresses, and they're coming for your bow and arrow. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Duke, and thank you for joining us. As always, I am joined by Katie Petrick of The Healthy Republic, and we're going to do the countdown, right, Katie?
We are going to do the countdown.
Let us know what you have today.
Well, President Trump is having another good week involving foreign relations. Of course, on Monday, the U.S. Embassy was officially moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and this coincided with the 70th anniversary of the Israeli Declaration of Independence. And so on hand from the U.S. were Ivanka Trump and her husband, Jared Kushner. We had representatives, Republican representatives from Congress. Mostly they were the senators, but of course, 0 Democrats decided to show up. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, "This is history. President Trump, by recognizing history, you have made history. All of us are deeply moved. All of us are deeply grateful." And what's so interesting about this story, on top of finally the U.S. Embassy being moved to Jerusalem, is that this should have been done back in 1995. In 1995, Congress actually passed the Jerusalem Embassy Act, and it took until we got to President Trump now in 2018 to actually move the embassy to Jerusalem, where it always should have been.
Yeah, there's so many things that trouble me about this story. One of them is that not a single Democrat politician showed up, including Jewish Democrat politicians. You think about the degree to which the Democrat Party has become the default voting party of American Judaism, American Jews. It is pretty shocking when you think about it that none of them were willing to go and stand in support of Israel. They were less worried about American Jews being bothered by the fact that they were snubbing Israel than they were for the bad photo op of giving Donald Trump credit for anything. That bothers me. Other things that bother me about this is you're exactly right. Forget 1995. We didn't need an act of Congress in 1995 under the Bill Clinton administration to remind us that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. It has always been, going back to biblical times, and certainly since the diplomatic, the spiritual headquarters, the spiritual capital, I should say, of Israel is Jerusalem. And it's always been that way. And so the idea that we would move our embassy there is going to cause anybody problems is odd, especially given that most countries won't. So what's the big deal? Hamas is an enemy of the United States. The Palestine people routinely burn the American flag. We give them lots of money and aid, and yet they routinely burn the flag and throw rocks and stones and bombs at our ally Israel. So why would it bother Hamas and the Palestinians that we moved a little bit farther away from them? Forget capitals for a moment. It's a hugely important symbolic gesture. I'm glad we did it. But forget that. Common sense says if people are throwing rocks at you and you can move farther away from the rocks, then you ought to do it. So congratulations to President Donald Trump. When you mentioned foreign relations and Donald Trump in the same sentence, I had a very different picture there for a moment. I'm glad we got back on the right track with that. I'm proud of him for doing what he did. And one of the advantages of having a president like Trump, which is to say an outsider, somebody who has not spent their whole last 30, 40 years in the fever swamp of Beltway accommodation. I love the fact that he can just do things. Well, we've had this on the books. It's a common sense thing to do. It would be a boost to our allies in Israel. It will be a rebuke to that faction in the Middle East that refuses peace. How many times have deals and bargains and compromises been offered to the Palestinian people? How many times have they said, no, it's not enough? Finally, a president does the right thing. Israel has been willing to compromise. Israel has compromised. Israel will not compromise in the fact that Jerusalem is at the center, the core of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years of Jewish history, as it should be. Congratulations, Donald Trump. And to all these people who are sniping at him, people like Chelsea Handler, who are mocking Nikki Haley for her strong support of Israel. Who was the other one you mentioned?
Bette Midler.
Bette Midler. Good Lord. The insane aspects of Hollywood Judaism have come out to condemn Benjamin Netanyahu. And you and I were talking about this before we started. You have these Palestinians, right, who are rushing the border. They are sending little kids into the fray here because they want those little kids shot so that they can get just this kind of reaction from Hollywood idiots like Bette Midler. The question is, on everybody's mind, where is Barbra Streisand, the arch lunatic of the Hebraic American Convention? Where is she?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I should really look into that.
One of her 6 luxury houses, no doubt.
She's probably preoccupied doing
I'm
something
sure she
like
is.
that. But what's so interesting, too, if you take a look and you go back to just another history lesson because I like giving history. If you look at the 1995 agreement, every 6 months, our president had the option to say, yes, we're going to move the embassy. Every 6 months. And President Trump even twice said, okay, we're not moving it yet. But that went through President Clinton. It went through Bush. It went through Obama. And it took until now to finally have some action. And that's something that is pretty, as Netanyahu says, like historic for not only Israel, but for America. And of course, the mainstream media says it's not historical, it's controversial. And one thing that we got immediately from the left and all the media involving the embassy is they couldn't just, point out this is great for America, great for Israel. They had to say, oh, what's happening in Gaza? And they made, in the New York Daily News specifically, decided on Tuesday to put their front page with Ivanka Trump seemingly pointing at, the violence that's happening, and it says "Daddy's little ghoul."
Yeah, leave that picture up there for a moment. That is remarkable. She's over there to support the move of the embassy, and now she's got blood on her hands, right? Daddy's little ghoul, right? They're so bored with attacking Donald Trump. They're not getting the same kind of bang for their anger buck by going after Trump. Everybody's kind of, when you've got Jimmy Kimmel, that half-wit of late-night TV, out there finally admitting that maybe we ought to just stop going after Trump so hard. That shows you not that Jimmy Kimmel has had a adult moment of sympathy, but simply that it's not working anymore. I mean, the continued attacks on Donald Trump are having exactly the opposite effect. People either yawn or they get increasingly annoyed, whether the criticism is justified or not. We know what you think. We know what the criticism of Donald Trump is. You keep talking about it isn't going to change anything. So what are they doing now? They're coming after Ivanka. They're coming after the family. The nasty things they said about Melania when she was in the hospital with her kidney procedure. They're just going after Barron Trump, we saw in the news this week again.
Well, yeah, in Hamas, they're the chief propagandists. That's what they do, and maybe they look to Hollywood to see how it's done best in mainstream media. Because what's happening right now, what Hamas is doing, putting out the babies, using them as shields, human shields. First off, why would you bring a baby to what's supposed to be a protest and supposed to be a peaceful protest, according to the mainstream media? What they're doing in putting all these babies and putting the women out there, they're getting the mainstream media to just eat it right out of their hands. And so when we have Nikki Haley, luckily, to come out and basically condemn everything that's being said, she actually went to the UN and addressed the United Nations the other day. And she said that those who suggest that the Gaza violence has anything to do with the location of the American embassy are sorely mistaken. Rather, the violence comes from those who reject the existence of the state of Israel in any location. And she's right. That's exactly what Hamas does. And yet the mainstream media is saying, oh, these poor Palestinians.
Yeah, America simply took their embassy and moved it. The Americans took their embassy and moved it to Jerusalem. This was what caused a huge swarm on the border, an attempt to override the fencing, to force their way in. And the vanguard was not led by the flower of Palestinian manhood. It was not led by the great freedom fighters from Allah who are willing to give their lives for the cause and have their 72 virgins. It was led by, think about the words of Christ, and a little child shall lead them, and how hideous, horribly perverted in the Holy Land this is, with the so-called nobility of the Palestinian resistance. It's an embarrassment to Palestine is what it is. And to call this, as that article did that Mike had up with Ivanka Trump on the cover, that to call it a slaughter is to argue that when Japanese kamikazes flew planes into American aircraft carriers, that was an American slaughter of Japanese. That's the exact same premise here. When these people willfully, for political and for propagandistic purposes, basically commit suicide in order to demoralize an enemy, there's no difference at all whatsoever. To call this a slaughter would be to call kamikaze deaths in World War II a slaughter, not a suicide. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely propagandistic.
Yeah, and Damon Linker of TheWeek.com put out a perfect tweet, I think, that summarizes what the mainstream media, their whole account of this is. He says, when people on both sides die, it's a battle. When people on only one side dies, it's a massacre, even when the Jews do it. So this social justice warrior garbage in the name of equality, that we have to have the same amount of people dying on Israel's side as on Palestine's side, it's complete garbage.
I like that. It's social justice warfare, right? The idea that if your side kills 6 of ours, we have to be able to kill 6 of yours, even though we attacked you, even though we're the ones who've lost our ever-loving minds because of a simple movement of an embassy. If we attack you, in all fairness, you have to let us kill the same number we kill, or else it's a slaughter. If that's how they design slaughter now, then we need more slaughters. If that's how the left defines slaughter, right, that when you send a ragtag army of children and women at the head of what is an assault, right, and people lobbing mortars and throwing bricks and grenades over the heads of these women, trying to fly drones with kites on them that have bombs, you're doing that over the heads of your own women and children. You have the audacity to call that a slaughter on the part of Israel. Then, hey, let's play the left's game. Then we'll call it a slaughter. All right, I mean, if that's what you want to call it, let's call it a slaughter.
Okay. In the name of equality still, we're going to be back home now. We're hearing a lot of woe and lamentation from Hollywood about the actors being paid equally. And so we have a story specifically first about Chris Pratt. You may know him from Parks and Rec. He's in the new Jurassic Park movies. He was also Guardians of the Galaxy, all those.
In other words, Chris Pratt has been in a lot of big-time movies that everybody's heard of.
As the lead actor.
I got you. I just want to make sure he's a known quantity, right?
Yeah. I've heard of him before. He's getting kind of blasted a little bit because he was paid $2 million more than Bryce Dallas Howard, who? So basically, Chris Pratt's getting paid $10 million. This Bryce Dallas Howard is getting paid $8 million in the Jurassic Park 2 movie, and people are up in arms because Chris Pratt's a male and this Bryce Dallas Howard is a female.
Well, why are they getting mad at Chris Pratt, number one? I'm pretty sure he wasn't in the room when Bryce Howard.
It's Ron Howard's daughter. That's as much as I know.
She's famous because we know who her dad is.
And she's a ginger? Yeah.
And I'm willing to bet that many of you either don't know who Bryce Howard. Many of you who've never heard of her before, or maybe know of her, you understand that she has probably never had this kind of a leading role in any movie. Not only is this not an insult to Bryce, she is now going to forefront aside one of Hollywood's great leading men. She's going to have a huge starring opportunity that's going to allow her to make millions and millions and millions of more money in future movies because of her bankability in this one. And she considers this, and Hollywood considers this, a prejudicial move for her career. These are people who do not have the vaguest idea how the free market works. And if Chris Pratt gets $8 million or $10 million, so what? You could make an argument that given the relative difference in their Hollywood profiles and statures, they're too close together. If I'm Chris Pratt, you're paying this woman $8 million to star in this movie who nobody's ever heard of? Pay me 14 or I'm walking. And I just have to point out, in almost every movie she's probably filmed in the last 100 years since she started becoming an actress, Meryl Streep has been paid equal or more than all of her male co-stars, always. She gets paid. Real, big-time, bankable female celebrities inevitably make more money than most of the males on camera with them. Why is it that the left sees it this way? It's a male versus a female thing. Why is it not a level of experience and bankability and drawing potential? Why do we consider that, right? So the women who draw, they get paid. The men who draw get paid. If you are a woman no one's heard of, or if you're a man that no one's heard in, you break into movies this way. You take smaller parts, you get paid less, you showcase your spot in bit parts, and then the next time a movie rolls around, hey, I want that girl from Jurassic Park. I want Opie's sister for Jurassic Park. I saw how wonderful she is. I want her, and I'm going to pay her more to star in the movie by herself next time. It is just stupid and venal. And the fact that the liberal press promotes this garbage as well, too. I know you've got more stories. Before I bust an aneurysm here, go on to the next story related to this.
All right, so I don't know if it's in response, coincidental, but at the same time, Benedict Cumberbatch has vowed to only take projects that pay men and women equally. And he said he's going to be using his profile in a new production company that he has called Sunny March to champion more female-focused dramas. He says, I'm proud that he's got a partner named Adam Acklin, and I are the only men in our production company. Our next project is a female story with a female lens about motherhood in a time of environmental disaster. If it's centered around my name to get investors, then we can use that attention for a raft of female projects. Half the audience is female.
So in other words, I'm going to use my clout as a big Hollywood star.
Yes.
Right? To run a company with another man, to be the boss, and and get paid a lot of money for it.
But they're only two.
The only two, right? So we're a couple of dudes in a hen house, basically. We're a couple of cocks in a hen house. That seems to me to be something devoutly to be wished, right? I've gotten to be such a big mega celebrity, me, Benedict Cumberbatch, Smaug. I've become such a great celebrity that I can afford to reap money off of all these female projects I'm going to let women star in, and I'm not going to have to share it with any men. This sounds dangerously close to a hashtag Me Too moment in the making. Why, if Benedict Cumberbatch is serious about this, why not create the company? Because this is what Hollywood is asking for. Create the company using your leverage as a male star, and then let the women have it, and you just walk away. Ben, that would be serious feminism. What you're doing is exploitation and mansplaining. Enough!
Speaking of hashtag Me Too movement, we have Selma Hayek, who was just at the Cannes Festival, and she says that if Hollywood actors are serious about equality, they will take pay cuts. She says, time's up. You had a good run, but it's time now to be generous with the actresses.
Right. So, in other words, the only way a man can demonstrate, and this is exactly what I just said about Benedict Cumberbatch, right? The only way a Hollywood male now can indicate to prove he is down for the struggle is to give away his salary to females, not to share the same salary. So for Selma, it's not enough that Ben Pratt steps back to $8 million, right?
Chris Pratt. Yeah.
Chris Pratt. That Chris Pratt voluntarily steps down from $10 million to $8 million so that he is equal to Bryce, right? That's not enough. What he must do now is go lower than her, right? In order to make her higher paid, because, as Selma Hayek says, and the great economist Selma Hayek, I'm sure 200 years from now, just like we're celebrating the birth of Karl Marx, the bicentennial, 200 years from now, we'll be celebrating the economic advisory capacity of Selma Hayek, and Hayekism will have replaced Marxism as the stupidest political philosophy still in existence. Nevertheless, what she is saying here is basically vindictive. And let's apply it. Let's take Hollywood and the liberals at face value. Whatever a woman says has to be taken as face value. When a woman's talking about issues of equity when it comes to work and pay, we're not allowed to argue with them. So, Mr. Cumberbatch, give the company you just created to the women who are going to star in your movies. So they're not just getting paid actress salaries, even if they're higher than men's. They are getting paid producer and company owner salaries. This will never happen. It'll never work. Cumberbatch will continue to get rich, being the cock of that particular walk. Selma Hayek being Selma Hayek, no one's going to cut her a check for this. People aren't even hiring her for movies to begin with. Maybe that's what we need in Hollywood. Unemployed female actresses should be guaranteed jobs, right? Guaranteed jobs. And how about what Seattle's doing? How about minimum basic salary for Hollywood actresses? So even if they're not working, they get a couple million a year just for equity's sake. Let's let Hollywood live with the crap they try to push on the rest of us.
Yeah, but you can't, like when you even say that it's for equality's sake, that the women get paid a couple million. Take a look at Sex and the City. 1, 2, and who knows if they're going to make another one.
Do I have to look at it?
You have to.
All right.
But Sarah Jessica Parker made $10 million. It took, I don't even know how many years or how many arguments before they got the one who plays Samantha. She argued to get $6 million, and then the other two, who no one apparently cares about, they each got $2 million. So just between those 4 women who make up the whole show in equal time and all of that, look at that disparity.
Yeah, and
no one's saying anything
the show
about
was
that.
at times produced. I think directed by women, right? Women writers on the show. So this is as close as you're going to get to a gynecological women's association, right? Sex and the City. How much did Chris Noth make?
I want to know.
Remember, wasn't he big?
Chris Noth, Mr. Big.
Mr. Big.
Mr. Big.
Now, why was Chris Noth's character? Is that as I pronounce his name right?
I mean,
so you've got basically one recurring male-female on that show. I'll bet you he made less, much less than all those other women did.
I actually tried looking it up. I couldn't find it.
You couldn't find it? It's probably so the only thing about Mr. Big that was infinitesimally small was his salary. Is that what you're telling me?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is the ironic. You think about all these traveling pants movies, all of these irremediable beaches, all of these steel magnolias, all of these irremediably tedious, weepy women's movies that have high-ranking female actresses at every level. We ought to do an investigation into this. What is the new movie that's out now with Hanoi Jane Fonda and all the old women?
Oh,
you're talking about?
I don't know what's talking. It's 50 Shades of Grey. That's all I know.
It's based on that.
It's all
and it's all
4 women.
It's all it's Candace
Bergen.
Right. All these basically
Brown.
senior women, right?
Oh, yes.
Let's do an investigation of what they're getting paid. Yeah. I'll bet you my last dollar, that they're not getting paid the same.
Okay.
Bet you they're not.
We'll take a look and take your word for it. Okay, I just very quickly, one actor who actually got it right is Rob Schneider. He actually came out and said, I, Rob Schneider, will no longer take projects that do not pay women equally, even if that means lowering the woman's salary substantially. So
that's cute.
So
what he's basically saying is, I'm one of those men who aren't tall, beautiful, and stupid. And so therefore, I get paid a lot lower than the other men I co-star with. I'm more than willing to share my salary base with any of those women. Of course, you'll have to drop them a few $1 million to get them down to me. But way to go, Rob. You let them know. You let them know how it sits.
We're going to move from Hollywood to abortion because that's always
Hollywood
a
to abortion.
Mother's Day was Sunday, and to honor all of the mothers, we actually had Glamour magazine publish an opinion piece called "How Motherhood Made Me a Better Abortion Provider," and this is by supposedly a doctor. Ghazala Moyetti. She actually says she became a doctor to be an abortionist. So, according to her, there is no Mother's Day card to celebrate abortion. Duh. For my patients that were already parenting, I feel like the deep love that they had for their children, they had, and for the pregnancies they were ending, choosing an abortion is an act of love.
Yeah, you know, black is white, up is down. This is doublespeak, isn't it? Notoriously, every Mother's Day, Planned Parenthood, and they did this time, sends out a great big tweet blessing and praising mothers when they're in the business of basically stopping motherhood. And so, fine, say what you want. I mean, the lie of the left is you're never going to be able to separate the relatively small aspect of Planned Parenthood's money-making scheme that deals with women's health. They don't even do their own mammograms. They farm them out from the slaughter of babies. And so you can call it what you want. You can pretend that motherhood is the decision to destroy life, not preserve it. You can pretend all you want. The real sacrilege here is that you have to do it on Mother's Day. You recognize, right? You people, you abortionists, you doctors that want to pretend love is hate, you people out there who, what was the other article that we talked about last week a little bit about, abortion was actually pro-life, right? You do this, you all do this because you know that people don't buy your platform. You know that left to your own devices and advertising your own procedures, no one's going to see you as taking the moral high ground. So what you do instead is you have to co-opt traditional holidays. Pretty soon we're going to hear from you that, well, we already have. This is actually a couple years ago. We did hear about this, that the birth of Jesus in the manger to the conception by an unwed mother was itself a feminist moment, right? And I remember we had a couple of activists last Christmas season that saying if the Virgin Mary had decided to abort her child, she would have been justified to have done so. And so you can't stand on your own 2 feet. The reality is that you must co-opt our traditional holidays and values and virtues and make it seem like you're part of it. Because when we look at what you do on its own face, it's wicked and indefensible. So keep at it. You seem to have a lot of success co-opting the traditions.
We're going to move on. We have just enough time for a viewer question. So this week's question comes from Steve in Washington. Dr. Duke, love the show and Chick-fil-A, especially the waffle fries. I'm out in Washington State, and Seattle is proposing a head tax, which raises taxes on corporate businesses like Starbucks and Amazon. They want to use the money raised to pay for affordable housing for homeless people. I can see some good points on both sides. What's your opinion?
What is the good side of doing this? Selectively taxing certain kinds of business to handle a problem that the people elected and given taxpayer money in Seattle refuse to fix. The elected politicians of Seattle who have access to the entire large budget of money from the federal, from the state level, and from local taxes that go to feed the machine of Seattle, they have not fixed the homeless problem. They have done nothing to alter it. They encourage more homelessness. Right? They set up camps. We see what's going on in San Francisco, feces and syringes on all the street corners. Seattle politicians were elected, empowered, and given huge coffers from the people of the city and the state to address this issue. They didn't do it, they won't do it, they can't do it. So what they're going to do now is choose certain businesses over other businesses and tax them disproportionately to fix the problem of their own making. Here's what's going to happen, Seattle, because the idiot city council voted to this. Was it 9-0? Voted for this. Yeah. Here's what's going to happen. This is going to go. You're going to collect all those monies from companies like Amazon and Starbucks, all these wonderful liberal companies, by the way, who squawk about the poor, who are now pissed off that you're doing it to them. At least they're right to be pissed off about it for a change. You're going to take their money, and then you're going to spend it And you are not going to reduce homelessness in Seattle one iota. In fact, because you're spending more money, you're going to get more homeless. And then what's going to happen is you're going to go to mom and dad Seattle and do exactly the same thing. And you're still not going to fix the problem, and you're going to get more homelessness. And as long as you keep electing economically illiterate idiots, go ahead and get Salma Hayek on your city board with this kind of thinking. You're going to get more of the problem, more taxation, and less money. But you get what you vote for.
Okay, Steve, thank you so much for your question. If you have a question for Dr. Duke or for me, especially if it's about waffle fries, make sure you send an email to askduke@fpeusa.org. And also, don't forget to like us on Facebook, like us on YouTube, and if you could go over to iTunes and give us a little review, maybe give us some positive affirmations, we'll take that too. You can find the podcast version on iTunes and SoundCloud. And now we want to shift to an interview that I conducted earlier with Midge, who partnered with Fleccas Talks to produce videos that speak to gun facts, immigration, and feminism. Here's that interview. To get to the truth and leave an impact, sometimes you have to slap someone in the face. Not physically, of course, but with cold, hard facts. Our guest this week has done just that. Mega Midge, working with Fleccas Talks, recently released 3 videos on YouTube. These videos were called Honest PSAs and were aimed at telling the truth about guns, immigration, and most recently, feminism. Actors were sent into the studio to read facts about these topics, and their reactions to the facts were quite telling. Midge, briefly tell us about the idea behind making the Honest PSA. What was its purpose?
Basically, we wanted to make videos that share these facts in an interesting way. And we came up with this concept. And originally, we sort of wanted to mimic a real PSA where we're having people talk about, in one of these celebrity PSAs where they're saying, did you know this fact or whatever thing that they're pushing in the PSA. But what we tried to do was have real people come in and read these facts and just sort of try to capture their reactions and try to maybe red pill a few people.
And the feminism video was the latest release. Now, in that video, it seemed like compared to the other two, you had a little pushback from the actors. And it was specifically from a woman who kind of seemed to have this light bulb moment at the end of your video where she said,
I thought this was like a feminist bit. Is this the point of this, really?
How did it seem, I guess, from your perspective as the producer, that the feminism video was different than the gun violence or the immigration topics you covered?
Well, I mean, we had pushback in every situation with all the topics that we recorded, and we actually scrapped one of them on the day of because we felt like, given the way that the other topics were going, we didn't want to push it and be, we didn't want to upset more people. So we kind of pulled back a little bit with that. So what ended up happening in that moment with the feminism video was that one woman was definitely, what you think of as a modern kind of third, fourth wave feminist. And she was really challenged for sure. So I don't know if she necessarily got the message, and there was a lot more to her interview, but I think we were actually really fair with what we showed in that kind of her pushback with that and that conversation, how it went.
Now that the 3 videos are all out on YouTube, so everyone can go check them out, what has been kind of the reaction overall? I guess maybe from the actor's perspective, but also what kind of reaction have you gotten from the viewers?
The viewers have loved it. It's been pretty awesome. Austin's videos have, he reaches a really wide audience, and I think people are really familiar with his work and kind of what he's trying to do with exposing some of the, liberal media bias and sort of what's being shown and on TV, and sort of providing an alternative, outlet.
In these videos, you want to educate, we want to educate with our videos, and most importantly, I think we all want the truth. What is it going to take, do you think, for truth-telling to become the norm again? Because clearly, we see that in the mainstream media, truth is not being told.
No, we're not. And that's really sad. And I mean, me personally, it's been a challenge because a lot of time people will say, that's a hate fact. And really all you're saying is a fact. And it shouldn't be whether or not it upsets someone or, it's a tough reality. But if we can't even speak about things that are true, I mean, it's a sick, sad world we live in. And I face it every day here in San Francisco where I feel like I can't say what I'm thinking because people aren't willing to hear it, or I'm going to be seen as some kind of bigot or something.
Yeah, and because you live out on the West Coast, it's kind of a different perspective than what maybe the rest of us are seeing either in the Midwest or even out on the East Coast. Talk a little bit about the uniqueness, I guess, that is California in general.
I mean, California's crazy. All the things that you see on the news that are going on out here are absolutely going on. So, I live in San Francisco, and the clips that you see with our homeless, with the drug abuse on the streets, it's all true. And I mean, it's unbelievable to me that people tolerate that, and that our politicians, keep creating laws and passing these regulations that don't actually help these problems. So right now I'm sort of really involved and interested in, we have an upcoming election for mayor of San Francisco on June 5th. And it's just fascinating to me because there's 7 Democrats running in this election and 1 Republican. And it's funny because it's like you have 7 people and they're all basically pushing the same thing, but they're all claiming to be different. So kind of California in a nutshell, I guess.
All right. So, Midge, what are some of the projects that you're working on now that you have released these 3 videos? And I know you've been tagging up a lot with Austin of Fleckus Talks and doing some of his Fleckus Talks videos out on the streets. But what else do you have in the works for us?
Yeah. So, my backstory is I'm a filmmaker. That's sort of my world. I'm a filmmaker, and I was an actress in LA for a long time. And I decided, sort of around the same time Austin did after the election, that now is the time that we really need to win our culture back. And, basically the left has completely dominated our media, our academia, our entertainment and Hollywood and everything. And we have to kind of swing that back. And luckily there's channels that are on YouTube where people can become informed or hear other opinions and other ways of thinking about things. And so, yeah, that's basically what we're trying to do. Austin and I have a number of projects coming up. We have been, basically I don't want to talk about it without him kind of being where he wants to be with it. But, we've got some exciting projects coming up. And as well as, now I'm kind of helping a friend produce a podcast. I'm more of, I don't know, I guess maybe I enjoy being behind the scenes a little bit more and helping to produce this kind of content. So hopefully we'll be releasing more things soon.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing what you have in the works for us, as well as what Austin's working on. And we'll take a look at YouTube. So, Midge, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
In this corner, your pugilistic pundit, the Duke of Diplomacy, the Professor of Patriotism, the Doctor of Domestic Tranquility. This is Right Makes Might with Dr. Duke.
Well, a couple of months ago, when you had the mayor of London, Mayor Khan, going after knives, one of the most restrictive gun ownership cities in the entire free world, London, banned guns, and so people are killing each other with knives. You may remember that Mayor Khan wanted to send his police officers on the street to arrest anybody and detain them who even seemed like they were carrying a gun. He argued that we're going to put the full force of the law against knife violence, right? Well, you knew this was going to come to America, and you knew it was going to come to America in either California and New York. New York, congratulations. You beat California to stupidity for once in your life. A new proposal in New York's legislature would outlaw, get this, all high school shooting sport programs in the state, including air rifle teams and archery clubs. Heaven help you if you're a middle school kid who has a Nerf rocketry club, because that's going to get banned too. Archery clubs. We no longer can teach kids responsible bow and arrowmanship in schools because it participates, we're told, in a culture of shooting violence. The bill's sponsor, Manhattan Democratic Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal, says she introduced her bill after reports that the suspect in the Valentine's Day shooting at Parkland had honed his gun skills through an in-school program where he learned how to shoot. If this is the case, if this is what we're going to do now, that kids cannot be allowed to learn how to fire bows and shoot bows and arrows, if they can't do that anymore because it participates in gun culture, we have a very serious problem in New York, and that problem is with evil driver's ed teachers. These are the teachers who put kids behind cars, tell them how to turn the engine on, how to shift into drive. These are the evil enablers who put our kids behind the wheel and put all of our lives at stake. Look, driving kills more kids by far than bow and arrows do. And this is the thing. If that's true, how can we continue to support any school culture that encourages driving? And let's be clear. Who do we hold responsible for this even more than the driver's ed teachers? The AAA. The NRA, it's the AAA, the American Automotive Association. They promote safe driving. If your kid gets stranded by the side of the road in his car, and the last thing we want that kid to do in the name of safety is be able to drive again, let the car be stalled. No. They'll send somebody to your kid's car, they'll change that tire, and they will put that kid dangerously back on the road. The only way we can have safety for our kids is to ban the AAA and the education, the driver's ed moms and dads, teachers who enable this kind of culture. There will be no safety and there will be no justice until that which kills our kids is removed from the schools. And if that means driver's ed has to go, and if that means we hold the AAA responsible, so be it, New York. Get on it. And that does it for us this week. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, and we will see you next time.